Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. Today I want to go over a new poll that was just released by Echelon Insights that shows a very interesting finding for a potential 2028 Democratic primary, and one that when you look at it on surface level really doesn't seem all that surprising. So I've seen this going around on Twitter a little bit the last few days, and that is, in a hypothetical 2028 Democratic presidential primary, if it were held today, who would be the first candidate you vote for? Right now, Kamala Harris is currently leading at 41% of a sample size of about 457 people. Democratic Governor of California, Gavin Newsom, is in second place at 8%. Shapiro, Governor of Pennsylvania, is in third with 7%. I believe current Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg is in fourth with 6%, tied with former VP nominee Tim Walz at 6%. AOC is at 4, Gretchen Whitmer 3, Pritzker 2, Bashir 2, Booker 1, Paulus, Moore, Fetterman all have 1 or less than 1 so far going forward. And this has been something that's been getting a lot of buzz because, of course, just 2 weeks ago, the 2024 presidential election was held. Donald Trump defeated Kamala Harris, and now a lot of people on the Democratic side are wondering, okay, who will be our nominee in 2028? Of course, the election just ended, so it was very early and way too soon to start saying who the nominee will be. But this poll I've been seeing has been getting a lot of buzz and a lot of noise. And what I want to talk about in this video is why Harris being at 41% actually doesn't surprise me at all. And I'm going to use a actually recent historical example as to why I think this doesn't really bug me. So I considered using Donald Trump as an example when he lost the election in 2020. However, Donald Trump was the president before in 2016, so he did have an extra incumbency advantage of being the former president. So that one I don't think fit as well. One that did fit as well was Mitt Romney in 2012. So you probably remember that in 2012, Barack Obama, the incumbent Democratic president, defeated Mitt Romney, the Republican nominee for president, in the 2012 election. It was 332 electoral votes for Obama, 206 for Romney, and what was a decently close election, but the electoral votes ended up being pretty much an electoral landslide. Similar to 2024, where there was a lot of close contests in the key swing states, but the electoral vote numbers ended up being pretty much a landslide. So what was happening here? Well, following the 2012 election, the Republican Party was essentially in a place of panic, not sure what they were going to do. There was no clear candidate to step up and run for 2016. There was not a clear direction. Everyone kind of knew that in 2008, there was an open primary, and after John McCain won the primary, had he not won the election, Mitt Romney's name was brought up immediately as kind of the next person to run as like the establishment favorite to lead the party in 2012. And so Mitt Romney did. 2016, the Republican Party was left without a clear direction for a very long time, which allowed an opening for someone like Donald Trump to run and really just take total control over the primary process, getting tons of support and win the Republican primary. But what everyone does forget about the 2016 Republican primary is everyone remembers from June of 2015 on where Donald Trump took control of the primary and won it in a blowout. No one really remembers that time period between 2012 and 2014, where the Republicans had multiple candidates who were interested in running, but none of the candidates were really going away with the polls where they had a massive lead. So there were actually some discussions early on that 2012 Republican nominee, Mitt Romney, would be the potential Republican candidate in 2016. And the reason that this was happening the most, and this is the point I'm making in with Kamala Harris now, was name recognition. All the Republicans, there was a list of like 15 to 20 Republicans who were looking at running, but none of them had the name recognition of Mitt Romney, as Mitt Romney was just the presidential nominee for one of the major parties in the United States just a few months and years ago. Kamala Harris is in a similar boat. Why is she polling at 41% in this poll when she just lost to Donald Trump? Simple. She's the vice president of the United States right now, and she was just on the ballot against Donald Trump 2 weeks ago, where everyone around the country learned her name. So when it comes to who would be the next one up, it's obvious the candidate with the highest name recognition is the current VP and the prior Democratic nominee, Kamala Harris. So it just makes sense. She's the one people have heard of the most of. She'll be the most likely one right now to be the nominee because that's who people know. This doesn't also mean this is going to last. As I mentioned, Mitt Romney in 2016 One poll by Quinnipiac University showed him ahead of all the other Republican contenders by at least 8 points. And this is just one poll example where Romney, had about 19%. Jeb Bush, second place at the time, had about 11%. So there was a lot of undecided vote remaining. Another poll from the Boston Herald showed Romney was the early leader in the state of New Hampshire, the early primary state, where there was a poll of 800 Granite Staters, and Romney wiped the 2016 field by a more than 2-to-1 margin. Here in New Hampshire, Romney in the poll was getting a backing of about 24% of likely GOP primary voters. Again, Romney made it very clear he was not going to run for the election, and yet they still gave him 24% when every other candidate running against Romney was below 10%. Why was this? Mitt Romney was not an electoral juggernaut or anything. He lost to Obama in the 2012 election, but the fact is, he was the person that everyone in the country and in the Republican primary knew at the time. And this continues. Looking at a poll from back in 2014, they looked at if the election were between Hillary Clinton and Mitt Romney instead of Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, Mitt Romney would have won 50-40. What a lot of time pollsters do is they'll do like a rematch poll where, say, in 2026 or 2025, after Donald Trump has been president for a year, they'll do a rematch poll and say, if the election were today, would you have voted for Donald Trump or Kamala Harris? And typically, it shows the candidate that lost performing slightly better now that they've been out of the news cycle a little bit, and the nostalgia view of them starts to set in. So what I'm thinking here is Kamala Harris right now starts out with a 41% lead in the Democratic presidential primary. We're really about 2 years away before serious talk starts picking up about who the Democratic nominee will be for 2028. I don't think it's going to be Kamala Harris, and this is why. That early lead typically does not last. And yes, you can make the argument in 2016, the only candidate where there was an early lead was Hillary Clinton. She did go on to become the Democratic nominee. She also nearly lost the primary to Bernie Sanders. So it was very, very close. An early lead right now for Kamala Harris at 41% does not guarantee she's going to win this primary. It also needs to be worth noted, when you add up the someone else unsure and all the other candidates, it's 41-59 pro Harris to against Harris. So a majority of the party technically does want someone other than her. Again, that's not the biggest deal because we're still 2 years away from any serious contention about the Democratic primary in 2028. But the main message I'm trying to get here is if you're a Democrat who likes Harris or doesn't like Harris, I wouldn't really overreact to these numbers because this is very typical where the candidate that was just on the ballot across the United States a few weeks ago, they should be leading in the 2028 Democratic primary, as they're the only person on this list that most Americans probably know. Gavin Newsom, very well, I think could end up being the Democratic nominee in 2028. He's the governor of California, largest state in the country by population. He's only getting 8% of the vote because outside of California, unless you're really into politics, he's not a well-known household name. That could totally change come 2026, 2027. If he starts campaigning, that can begin to change. But right now, the only name on this list that's a true household name is Kamala Harris. And you could make the argument Tim Walz is as well, being Harris's running mate. He starts off at 6% as well, and I would argue that's because he was on the national ticket with Harris. So Harris being at 41% does not surprise me, but I also don't think this is like the Democrats are 100% going to nominate Harris in 2028. I think this is more of a situation of all these people on the list, she's the only one that people have actually heard of. Continuing with this, there's another poll back in Politico that showed Romney once again tied with Jeb Bush, who was the leader at the time in the poll. Although Romney actually had 19%, Bush had 14% in that poll. So Romney continued to lead in the polls going into about 2014, when Romney made it clear he wasn't going to run and things started to shift away. Kamala Harris, I think it's more likely than not, is not going to run in the 2028 Democratic presidential primary. Maybe if she wants to, she certainly could run again. I think it's more likely she becomes governor of California when Gavin Newsom runs for president. I think that's a more likely scenario for her. But there is precedent, you could argue, of a former nominee running for president again and getting the nomination. I mean, you don't have to look too far back. Donald Trump just did it this year. The only thing is Trump had the advantage of being the president. Harris doesn't have that. The only thing she has is that she was the vice president, which she could use as a potential stepping stone in terms of, I was the vice president, I deserve to be the nominee, although she was just the nominee as well. Yes, she only had a few months to campaign compared to a typical primary cycle, but I could see this argument being made. Harris is the strongest position to win the 2028 Democratic primary right now because she's the only household name out of all these Democrats on the list. I would bet everything that over the next 2 to 3 years, come the Democratic primary, Kamala Harris is not going to be the number one candidate in the 2028 Democratic presidential primary. As more of these candidates become more well-known, more household names, and the media attention picks up. Right now, Harris is just leading because she is the person everyone knows. There also is a little bit of an advantage here where it is possible that there will be multiple candidates running as well on the Republican side, but J.D. Vance is Donald Trump's vice president, and it's more likely than not J.D. Vance will be the nominee in 2028. Vivek Ramaswamy, very close to the president and Senator Vance. I doubt he runs against them. Nikki Haley, I could actually see potentially running against Vance. DeSantis, maybe, but I don't know if he'd want to go up against Vance. It's more likely he'd be his VP potentially. Cruz and Rubio, I don't think would run against Vance as they're very closely aligned with him as well. So I think a lot of the Republican field, aside from maybe Nikki Haley, is pretty much cleared for J.D. Vance. So the Republicans have the advantage of pretty much knowing who their nominee will likely be. The Democrats have a wide open primary for 2028, which again, one last time, is why I think Kamala Harris is leading right now, is because this is a wide open primary and none of these people are really well known yet, except for the vice president who's just the Democratic nominee. So yes, this poll, I'm sure will get a lot of people's attention, but I don't think a few years from now we're going to be talking about Kamala Harris realistically being the Democratic nominee again in 2028. So that'll do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Please, if you enjoyed the video, give it a like, click subscribe, share with your friends and family, and hope to see you in a future video. That will do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to give it a like. And if you really liked it, please remember to click the subscribe button and make sure you turn post notifications on so you always get notified when I post a new video. That way you never miss one. Also, please remember to share this video with your friends and family if you really like the video. And remember to stay tuned because I'll be posting at least one video every single day leading up until Election Day. So I'd really appreciate it if you keep coming back and watching those videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in a future video.